a place for conversations. SDAQ&A. You're safe to speak your truth. Common ground, shared beliefs with lots of room for disagreement. Tell us all what you believe and let us see if we can challenge you. From all paths coming here to share their stories. Some have left this global church, some remain and defend her. Where are you on the path? Does Ellen still appeal to you? SDAQ&A, you are welcome here. 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 Oh, SDAQ&A, you are welcome here. SDAQ&A, you
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the never be the same.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another SDA Q&A. I am your host for today and always. Peter Dixon is my name. Good to see you all here in the chat. Good to have you on today's program. And, oh, hang on a second. Can't forget to have our special logo in the background there. Must have fallen down. So, yes, good to have you here. I hope you had a good weekend. And a few days after that, I hope they all went well for you. And I've bought a shipping container. That's been my last few days. I used to own a music shop, and when I sold it quite a few years ago, all the equipment is just to my right in my studio and shed. And it is also in a storage unit, which I pay every week for. And I thought, you know what? If I buy a shipping container, I can put all the stuff in it, go through it, sell the shipping container after maybe a year, make my money back on it, and save on storage. So anyway, that's a little bit about my week. What have you guys been up to? Let me know in the comments. Wasn't our Good News Fellowship amazing last week? Really enjoyed it. And don't forget, if you'd like to join the fellowship over there, you do need to go to, and I'm just trying to find the link to bring up on the screen. Where has it gone? Somewhere here. I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Yeah, just look at YouTube and search for @Gospel Good News Fellowship, and you'll see the channel. My goal is by this next program, and who's up? Jennifer Colburn is joining us this week. I want to have 200 subscribers over there. So if you aren't already subscribing, please go and find the channel and sign up. Before we get into today's program, please lean forward and hit that like button. I'm just going to check how many of you have hit it already. Let's see. Let's have a look here. Oh, 13 of you. That's good. There's more than that watching. Let me just have a little sip of my nice little cup of tea while I wait for you to lean forward. Click that like button. Really helps the algorithms. Facebook rewards engagement, and engagement is comments, likes, and subscribes. Facebook and YouTube do that. And look, I want to thank everyone for supporting me. Because of my plug and appeal last week, and a reminder that each month I'm paying Restream, Libsyn, 3 or 4, Zoom even for here. We're setting up StreamYard. We're accessing some other channels. Patreon's about to get kicked off. Because I mentioned that, and I hate asking, but because I mentioned it, I now have had this month and next month paid for with those expenses. So I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to support what I'm doing, You can go to paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music, and I am working on ways to, for other way. People have often said, are there other ways we can donate? And so yes, through Patreon, we'll have that set up very soon. You can click the QR code there as well. So yeah, I don't really like talking about that kind of stuff, but it does cost to do the show, and I'm happy to do it for free. But I'd just be nice to break even. So I really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Today we're going to continue on. This is the last day I will be doing this story of Robert and Monica Vowless. It's an important story. You've heard me talk about it in the 30s. This couple, the 20s, 30s, and 40s and beyond, they were Seventh-day Adventists, and they tried to ask some questions. And in this time period, which I'm referring to as the golden era of Adventism, where Ellen White was put up on the pedestal, the power of the white estate became huge, not that it wasn't already. And this era, 1919 to 1959, more than prior to that, and less so since that, the church was able to suppress people in ways that almost approach, I can't say the word, but it's like fashion with a schism at the end. And if I say it, I literally get a mute on whatever channel I'm on. But that kind of suppression in that era, 1919 to 1959, was absolutely huge within the Adventist Church. Huge. And I didn't even know until Gillian Ford alerted me to this couple and reminded me that we had a number of people, all from New Zealand actually, who were dissidents, people who wanted to ask questions, stir the pot a little bit like what I do, not to attack, but to ask questions and keep people, the leaders, honest. So anyway, Gillian, and I'm hoping she comes on the program at the end of today's show and just has a little recap. She has released a little booklet of, I think, 150 pages, and it covers all these New Zealand dissidents and their stories and articles and letters that they wrote. And what we have been doing over the last 2 weeks is I've been reading some of Monica Vowless, some of her material, and last week we read some of Robert's material. And here's an important thing. Go to truthaurfables.com. By the way, if you work on that channel, that website, or you know someone who can put me in touch with the owner of it, I would love to have them on the show. Truthaurfables.com, an absolutely incredible resource. Go and check it out after today's program. But take a note of it. And you can just type in Robert Vowless, Monica Vowless, and maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, but hopefully. And all that material comes up. I've only read some of it. And today we're just going to complete reading the second part of part 1 of Robert's letter. And go back last week and watch these programs if you haven't. What you will find are people who were asking questions, got shut down, marginalized, suppressed, ridiculed, shamed. And this is 90 plus years ago. I've done a lot of shows on Des Ford and how badly he and Gillian were treated in the Glacier View episode leading up to it and post. Shameful treatment. Shameful treatment. And the church pretty well kept all that secret and suppressed as well. But now that social media is here, In fact, I would suggest that the church has been successful in suppression from 1919 to 2009. I want to broaden that. But now that social media is here, they can't keep us quiet. And even the good guys, the gospel Adventists, keep trying to say, oh, you're just negative and, got a bone to, what's the word they use? I can't remember. But the reality is open discussion is important. And this story that we will just continue reading today of Robert and Monica just highlights the systematic and systemic approach the Seventh-day Adventist Church takes to remove and silence and suppress and marginalize its members and lower level employees. More so, this is my point, more so than your average run-of-the-mill organization. That's why online you'll find Mormon program, former Mormon programs, former Jehovah's Witnesses programs, former Seventh-day Adventist programs, way more than any other Protestant religion, because there is something to see here, something that shouldn't be brushed under the carpet, and that is a kind of leadership that does not allow people to ask questions. You knew it was coming. These guys, the good guys, see their names there. I've interviewed at least half of them. Gil Valentine I've interviewed. George Knight I have interviewed. Niels Eric Andreessen, Jonathan Butler, Denny 14, Lawrence Geraghty, Ron Graybill. I've interviewed most of these guys, and I have loved their material over the years. Loved it. Continue to love it. I love it that they did this book. But my point isn't to criticize these beliefs or the conservative people's beliefs or anyone on the Adventist spectrum. Believe what you want. Look at the data. Form your own opinion. I don't like suppression of questions. I don't like when people suppress other people's ideas. And I think finally that after nearly 500 interviews, people are getting that about me. This is not about defending Robert and Monica's claims and beliefs or Des Ford's or these guys. The book, as you know, was banned within 6 days. Suppression. My point is that Adventism, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, has tactics and a systematic way of shutting down any narrative that is outside of what it wants you to believe. So sure, if Ted Wilson isn't your Adventism and the new guy, Kohler, isn't your Adventist representative, even though he is, if you are an Adventist, sure, you can say, hey, that's not my Adventism. But the reality is you can't share your special kind of Adventism without having it shut down, suppressed, marginalized, cast aside, and you will be shamed. You will be told to pull your head in. Right now, here in Australia, the Australian Union Conference, or whatever it's called, the AUC, is meeting. They started on the 30th of August, and they're meeting, I think, until tomorrow. And leading up to this meeting of over 200 delegates, imagine 200 delegates, no doubt their partners as well, converging on a place, I think in Melbourne or Sydney, I can't remember. Imagine the cost of that. And people have been telling me for weeks now, hey, finally, women's ordination is going to be placed front and center, and action is going to be taken. Well, I did an interview last week with Debbie Hooper and Peter Mashenko and Paul Katanko, who is an SDA pastor who is there right now. And we chatted about how maybe this meeting isn't going to be as progressive as they'd promised. Why? Because top-level leadership has a narrative that they want you to stick to and keep in. So all you good guys out there, hey, this is not my Adventist church. That's not my Adventism. What is your Adventism? Aren't you equally as shocked as me that we are in 2025 and women cannot even apply for certain positions of leadership in the Adventist church? Why? Because they are women. This is unethical. What are you guys, the good guys, what are you doing about it? I left because of it 10 years ago, 9.5. It's time. And you guys, if you're at the meeting today and you're watching today and you scurried out for lunch and you've tuned into SDA&A, as I know many of you have, do something. It's time for action. Okay. Rochelle Anonymous. Thank you, Rochelle. Rochelle runs our SDA&A book club, and she does a fantastic job. And it is on this week, Thursday. It'll be when our gospel program finishes. So it's usually around 8 p.m. Pacific time. So Thursday, 8 p.m. Pacific. Let's aim for that. And here in Australia, it's usually around 1 p.m. New South Wales time. Cannot wait. And Rochelle, thank you for the reminder. And Rochelle, I've just made you a moderator in SDA&A, so you are able to just give that a bit of a plug for us in there as well. So it's hard to tell the time where Peter's at with his rooster crowing. Peter, rooster crowing. What's going on here? Oh, I love it. So, let's get into... and Trail Rider writes, which is why we can say whatever we want now that we're at now. Oh, that's this, which is why you can say whatever you want now that you're out. Yes. And I spoke up a lot when I was in the church, and all of a sudden, literally, I'd suddenly find that I'd have gigs cancelled. And it's just incredible. Church leadership, you can just hear them meeting on their little committee meetings. Oh, did you hear that Peter Dixon spoke up about this the other day? Yes. Can you please contact Reg down at One Turner and cancel that gig that he's got coming up, please? That has happened many times. You speak up, you're shut down. More than in other denominations. When I began singing for other denominations, I was amazed at how the leadership accepted me. I was so lucky within the Adventist church that the grassroots people accepted me, and the odd youth leader would kind of get me in here and there. I was very lucky with that and have no complaints about my music over 30 years, sharing my music to Seventh-day Adventists. I have no complaints about the people who liked my music. None at all. I was very well supported by that grassroots kind of group. And if you like my music, you can go to Spotify there and look up Standing at the Cross by Peter Dixon Band. That's a lot of the kind of music I was singing around the traps. But when I began singing to the other denominations, and I really loved connecting with the audiences, but then I began mingling and hanging out with the leaders, like the top level guys, the guys that would run the festivals, run the events, and they would invite me for dinner. They would invite me on their committee meetings. They would hang out with me if I was in town or if they were in town, and they loved me and they embraced me and they did everything they could to lift me up. That was not my experience with Seventh-day Adventist leaders. Sure, they would invite me along. I even sang at the SPD Christmas party once, and it was fantastic. I'm talking about the big picture. Leadership that did not want my kind of ministry, because not only did I sing, I shared my thoughts. I offered constructive criticism about leadership, theology, women's ordination. And it was when I spoke up that I began to be treated and marginalized. So, this couple today that we are looking a bit more deeply into, and I think next week we're going to look at Fletcher and Grieve, a couple of other New Zealanders that were asking questions and told to shut up. But today we're reading the last part of Robert Thomas Vowless' letter. This part, I'm not sure if he gets more into theology or not here. Let's see if I can bring it onto the screen. And I don't think there's much to go today. I don't think there's a huge amount for me to finish off reading. Let's see if I can get that on the screen more. Is that working a bit better? Let's see. Yeah, I think you can see that a bit better now. Just let me know in the comments. But yeah, we're continuing on from his, I guess you'd call it an open letter, an article. And as I mentioned earlier, it is available on truthorfables.com. And I think as of next week, and we'll get Gillian on the show, her booklet will be available on Amazon, which will have all this. And I think there might even be some free copies she's going to send to me to send out to some of you as well. Okay, well, that took 30 minutes, 10-minute intro with music. Someone said it's a long song. I played 2 songs back to back. So let's keep reading. And then we'll look at some of your comments, and we'll say farewell for today. So it might be an earlier one today. But yeah, share your stories in the comments. I love reading about them. Okay. Go for it, Pete. It's moved again. What? Is that back in the center? I think so. Apologies. Yeah, I think you can see that okay. Supposed precious rays of light proves useful for money making. The prophets of the Bible were generally hard-working people and had little. Mrs. White says, "We entered upon our work penniless." Testimonies, Volume 1 to 75. And that is we, being Mrs. White and her husband. This point is often brought up by SDAs, but that is as far as they ever say. Why do they not say further? Perhaps it is because of the following. Soon after they began and became leaders, they commercialized their work and managed to supply themselves well. And when Mr. White died, 1881, it is said that he left between $15,000 and $20,000. For the present, I do not need to show how this was made, but let me quote a couple more of her writings. If there is one work more important than another, it is that of getting our publications before the public, thus leading them to search the scriptures. Testimonies V for page 390, I think that is. You should lend spirit of prophecy to your neighbors and prevail upon them to buy copies for themselves. Missionaries for God, you should be earnest, active, vigorous workers. Testimonies 4, page 391. Many are going directly contrary to the light which God has given to his people because they do not read the books which contain light and knowledge in cautions, reproof. So precious, coming from the throne of God, is hid under a bushel. God will make his people responsible for this neglect. That's page 391. Isn't that interesting that this is me talking now, not Robert, but isn't it interesting that she has called her writings as being so precious, coming from the throne of God? Back to the article. So, of course, her books were pushed and sold in large numbers, and as a result, she received large financial returns through receiving royalties on everything she has written. Her royalties received from one publishing house alone in Washington, D.C. in the year 1911 amounted to $8,000, which was more than the net profits for the publishing house itself for that year. From one book alone, she received over $40,000, and from all her books, over $100,000 up until her death in 1915. And they are fixed that since her death, her son is to receive the royalty and still is. Think of it, God, remember this is written in about 1935. Think of it, God giving revelations to anyone to sell to the people. I wonder how many royalties Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Paul, and John, and the others received. That is comparing them with Mrs. White, as the conference does. And, you know, that's dollars back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Convert that to 25 US dollars. A prophetess's indebtedness. No, we will not leave the financial side of the question here, but we'll read some more of her writings as follows. Debts must not be allowed to accumulate term after term. The very highest kind of education that could be given is to shun the incurring of debt as you would shun disease. Testimonies, Volume 6, page 211. Further should shun debt as we should shun leprosy. It's page 217 of the same volume. Very good, but why, if such was the precious light that shone from the throne, did she die $90,000 in debt? And practically all this was in the form of notes given for borrowed money. Her total assets amounted to $60,000, though the conference paid $87,000 for them, thinking it would cover her indebtedness. She borrowed money from about 60 individuals and institutions, thus making an average amount of $1,500 each. Many more startling facts could be given here, but this is sufficient for the time being to convince whether she was a prophetess or not. Now, I've often wondered how the church says that she died in debt. Was that like when businesses run at a loss so they don't have to pay much tax when really they have got a lot of money coming in? But on the books, it looks like they're in debt. I don't know. I've never fully understood that she made a lot of money, but the church says that she died in debt. Maybe some of you could point me to articles that clarify that a bit more. When some of the SDA pastors are cornered upon this indebtedness, they try to smother it by saying it went into the work in various ways. But this is not the case, for it is leaked out from the best of authority that $60,000 of it went to pay off one of her son's bad debts. And it is reported that the General Conference has had to pay off another $60,000 of such indebtedness since Mrs. White's death. A few years ago, I came across a paper mentioning that the same Mrs. White died a bankrupt woman, but I could not find out any more until just recently when I read an article written in the American paper by the editor of The Gathering Call in Riverside, California, September 1932. That's where Steve Daly's church is, and I was there February last year. Anyway, that's a side note. A footnote was included asking for anyone who is interested in this to write to him, and he will give further particulars, including particulars of some startling statements in her will. I have since then seen this indebtedness endorsed by other writers, although their publications were written earlier, some dating back to 1919. If this is not correct, may I ask why it is that the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists is not publicly denying such to be true? I myself think that it is because her indebtedness is like her plagiarism and cannot be denied. Otherwise, it seems strange that such statements can be published in papers and sent worldwide without a denial or a libel issued against them. I believe that most people will think the same as I do about this. Members excommunicated following the steps of Mrs. White. Late in 1924, W.A. Spicer, then world president of Seventh-day Adventists, announced that one of the professed successors of Mrs. White, a Mrs. M.W. Rowan, and her followers had been excommunicated from the denomination for teaching that probation ended February 6, 1924, and that Christ would return February 6, 1925. Why should not Mrs. White and her followers likewise have been excommunicated for teaching that probation closed in 1844 and that Christ would come 7 years later in 1851? I wonder if Spicer would explain. Was Christ a sinner, and is God blamable for man's sin? In John 9:24, we read where the Jews said that Christ was a sinner. The following statement is taken from the Review and Herald, May 1st, 1894. As sin increased and men sank lower in degradation, Christ went lower and lower in his humiliation, until there was no lower depth that he could reach in order to lift man from his moral degradation. From an unpublished private testimony by Ellen G. White. But shall we take license by such humiliation of our Lord to reach us in our state of degradation, and to restore in us the image which lie implanted in his creatures at creation, but which we have lost to continue in those sins? Man had become exceedingly sinful, and by the taking of the life of animals and the eating of their flesh, he became still more bloodthirsty, until he came to regard human life with astounding indifference. If Christ had held himself aloof from them and had not stepped down with them in flesh eating, he could not have saved those who, through ignorance of the truth, thus indulged their appetites. Therefore God now, since the flood, places in the hand of man, by permitting him to eat animal food, that which will bring upon himself the curse. If we analyze this, we find the following. 1, flesh eating is degrading. 2, it causes those who eat it to become still more bloodthirsty. And 3, to regard human life with astonishing indifference. 4, it brings the curse upon man. Christ, in order to save those who thus sinned, had to step down and join them in this degrading and bloodthirsty sin. 5, if Christ had not stepped down with them in flesh eating, he could not have saved them. What a monstrous statement to make. What a charge to bring against Christ. If there is anything in this SDA argument, we must come to the following conclusions: that in order for Christ to reach or save the thief, the murderer, or the adulterer, it would have been necessary for him to have stepped down and committed those sins also. What madness to go to sustain Mrs. White's unscriptural teachings. Investigative judgment and inspired dates. Now, while the good elders and pastors are on the job explaining all this about probation being closed in 1844, the collecting of royalties for divine revelations from God, and including, if they can, some idea as to how much in royalties Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Paul, and John received out of theirs, the prophetess's indebtedness at death, plagiarism, and other questions in this, including Christ's flesh eating and God being responsible for man's degradation, but placing in his hand that which brings upon himself the curse. Also, would they explain something about this expression, the investigative judgment? I've read of the day of judgment, righteous judgment, the judgment of the quick and the dead, the other judgments, but I have not read anything in the Bible about the investigative judgment. I know Mrs. White says that Jesus is conducting an investigative judgment to ascertain which of the descendants of Adam are worthy of eternal life. He has been there 88 years. This is written in 1932. 1844 to 1932. That's the year of my father's birth, and he turns 93 in a couple of weeks. So this material was written and suppressed over 90 years ago. So he has been there 88 years, finding out whether God did right in destroying the antediluvian world, Sodom and Gomorrah, Ananias and Sapphira, and all the others up to 1932, the present time. Genesis 6:5 and other scriptures tells that God even knew their evil thoughts. So surely God would know what he was doing when he destroyed them. So what is this investigative judgment about? Is it that Christ doubts his Father and has to make investigations into such matters? And why were William Miller's and Mrs. White's divinely endorsed dates of 508 to 538, 1798 and 1844 being altered by the conference committee at Washington to 503, 533, 1793 and 1838? Is it true that 1798 and 1844 are still carried? Possibly as a stop to conservatives, but these new dates are part of the diagram. This never occurred before. Why now? Start asking your good elders questions about these dates, and you will find them doing similar to the good elder Stevens of Detroit, who went limping from the platform when someone put such questions to him. Oh, suddenly my knee's a bit sore. Sorry. If this proves too embarrassing for them to answer, then write a line to Washington asking them to send you the committee report and turn to page 265 and see for yourselves. Then they could also give a little advice upon the reform dress with its long pants, which was given by divine revelation through Mrs. White, and a little information to the good housewives upon the divinely endorsed washing machine. These are only a few quotations and statements which can give to show you how ridiculous it is to believe that her visions were of God. See, people say, well, Ella made mistakes, she had flaws, she got the reform dress wrong. Yeah, I could cope with that if she hadn't told us that the revelations came from God. This woman did not have divine revelations. At best, she had some inspirational moments and was quite the strong human individual that carried off some pretty amazing business and entrepreneurial feats. But she did not have divine revelation. So what do you do with that? She claimed she did. She demonstrably didn't. They're more than just flaws and mistakes. Anyway, back to the article. Visions, results of nervous disorders. Some of my readers may be troubled with the question as to how women who evidently at first conscientiously thought she was being used of God could practice such deceptions. That is, in her plagiarism and in saying she saw a thing in vision when she was previously informed by some other agents. In answer, I would say that no doubt she was a self-deceived woman, and abundant proof can be had from medical authorities. Yeah, I tend to agree with that too. I think she'd really had a lot of self-deception going on. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. And abundant proof can be had from medical authorities to show that her visions were one of many symptoms she manifested, which show that she was suffering from a nervous disease, the result of her misfortune, perhaps, of being hit. Sorry, he didn't put perhaps, that's my addition. The result of her misfortune of being hit in the face with a stone in her childhood. The blow was so severe that caused her to lay in a stupor for 3 weeks. One writer who knew her personally affirms that he knew 4 other SDA women who had similar visions. All were sincere Christians, fully believed in their own visions, but they were all sickly, nervous, and hysterical. Mrs. White continually says in her own writings that her health was very poor, and at times she was afraid she would lose her reason. She says in her own words, "In the night I have awakened my husband, saying, I am afraid I shall become an infidel." If she was sure her visions were of divine origin, why should she be afraid that she would become an infidel? It can often be noted also that she often mentions being very sick just previous to having a vision. Physicians who attended her when she was a patient in the sanitariums, who have had abundant opportunity to examine her, in the testimony of which men as Dr. Fairfield, Dr. William Russell, and Dr. J.H. Kellogg, is that since they have observed her during a period of years and knowing her history from the beginning, they have no doubt but what she was subject to, that she was subject to hysterical trances. Dr. J.H. Kellogg, who was brought up in her home and who was in later years head physician at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, says he was compelled in the end to lose faith in her visions, even though it was against his best interests to renounce them. In Dr. George B. Wood's Practice of Medicines, page 721, volume 1, is it? We read the following description of a disease from mental disorders. Ecstasy is an affection in which, with a loss of consciousness, existing circumstances, and insensibility to impression from without, there is an apparent exaltation of the intellectual or emotional functions, as if the individual were raised into a different nature or different sphere of existence. The patient appears wrapped up in some engrossing thought or feeling, with an expression upon his countenance as of lofty contemplations or ineffable delight. Upon recovering from the spell, the patient generally remembers his thoughts and feelings more or less accurately, and sometimes tells of wonderful visions that he has seen, of visits to the regions of the blessed, of ravishing harmony and splendor, of inexpressible enjoyment of the senses or affections. Dr. G. Durand, MD, PhD, member of the American Medical Association and fellow of the New York Academy of Medicine, in describing ecstasy and catalepsy, says, "It often happens that the 2 diseases alternate or coexist. In ecstasy, the limbs are motionless but not rigid. The eyes are open, the pupils fixed, the livid lips parted in smiles, and the arms extended to embrace the beloved vision. The body is erect and raised to its utmost height, or else is extended at full length in recumbent posture. A peculiar radiant smile illuminates the countenance, and the whole aspect and attitude is that of intense mental exaltation. Sometimes the patient is silent, the mind being apparently absorbed in meditation or in the contemplation of some beatific vision. Sometimes there is mystical speaking or prophesying or singing, or the lips may be moved without any sound escaping. Usually there is complete insensibility to external impressions. Ecstasy is often associated with the religious monomania. It was often quite common among the inmates of convents, and is now not unfrequently met with at camp meetings and other gatherings of a similar nature. Many truly devout people are ecstatics. Dr. Roberts' Theory and Practice of Medicine, pages 393, 394, in speaking of such mental diseases, says there appears to be a complete stoppage of respiration, or the patient appears to hold his breath. These statements favorably compare Elder Loughborough's description of Mrs. White's condition in vision in his book, Rise and Progress of Seventh-day Adventists, page 94. For about 4 or 5 seconds, she seems to drop down like a person in a swoon, or one having lost his strength. She then seems to be instantly filled with superhuman strength, sometimes rising once to her feet and walking about the room. There are frequent movements of the hands and arms, pointing to the right or left as her head turns. All these movements are made in a most graceful manner. In whatever position the hand or arm may be placed, it is impossible for anyone to move it. Her eyes are always open, but she does not wink. Her head is raised and she is looking upwards, not with a vacant stare, but with a pleasant expression, only differing from the normal in that she appears to be looking intently at some distant object. She does not breathe, yet her pulse beats regularly. If space allowed, many more statements could be given from medical authorities upon the diseases of hysteria, catalepsy, epilepsy, and ecstasy, which are all nervous diseases, often coexisting or blending together. These statements would correspond precisely with many statements from her own pen. The above explanation is given to show that her deceptions can be accounted for without impeaching her moral character, and I, with others, am glad to account for it in this way. Now, we're going to leave the Robert Vowless article there. He has a part 2 to that, where he unpacks more about the theological doctrines and his views on that. As I was reading that, because I've often wondered that last paragraph that he said there, where he views that as her deception, that her deceptions can be accounted for without impeaching her moral character. That's how he chose to see it. That's how I have tended to see it. People like Steve Daly don't see it that way. And it occurred to me, and I'm very interested in your thoughts on this, because it's a little conundrum I've never been able to really work out. But it occurs to me that if someone does have that medical condition, and I do believe she did, I believe she had the conditions that he just outlined there. But people who have those conditions don't turn them on and off like a tap. If you research her and James White at the peak of their traveling on tour, camp to camp or house to house, meeting to meeting, town to town, they seemed to have a formula in their program. He would come on first, do a bit of a theological talk. She would come out, go into vision, and then leave the stage while he talked about I think encouraging people to have some kind of commitment, buy the leaflets they were selling while she was backstage resting, preparing, and then she would come back and share. Now, this is just my understanding, having read a fair bit on this topic. She would then come back and talk about the vision, and then they would close the evening. I'm pretty sure Willie White talks about it because he would go along to a lot of their meetings. Yeah, so it just hit me then. If she was true, and I think she had these ecstatic things for real, but if you're doing a show and you are reproducing that night after night, to me that indicates that you are aware of your condition and the impact it has on others. And even if you're not going to fall into that ecstatic moment that night, you need to pretend you are. So that puts me on the other side of the fence of feeling that maybe she was in, that this is an explanation, as Robert says, that her deceptions can be accounted for. I'm starting to think that the deceptions can be accounted for at times, but if you're in a traveling gospel roadshow where you have a formula every night, and part of that formula is presenting a vision, that seems to me as being a little bit manipulative, shall we say. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with my new leaning? And Steve Daly will be on the show in a few weeks, so maybe we can ask him about that. What are your thoughts? I would love to hear them in the comment. A couple of people have made a donation already. Thank you so much. It pops up on my screen with a little bing whenever someone scans the QR code. So I really appreciate when people support what I'm doing. Thank you very much. So that ends our discussion on the Vowless couple, Monica and Robert. And again, thank you so much to Gillian Ford for putting me onto that. If Gillian is there, I'd love to have her join me for a little 5-minute chat, but I don't know if she has seen my message. So in a minute or two, she will click that link if she sees it. And a big happy birthday to my brother-in-law, Cliff. It's his birthday today, just in case he's watching. Let's just have a look at a few comments and then we will close. Tomorrow, by the way, I am... Oh, bing, another QR code scan. Thank you. I'll check out who that was later. Thank you very much. I'm actually... They've changed a little bit in PayPal where I now get to see who what the email address is. So I'm going to try and get organized and really send some thank you messages. We'll see how organized I can get. I lack skills in that area. But tomorrow I am running the Des Ford Season 2 rewatch. Join me this time tomorrow, where I will be watching the interview I did with Lyndon Rogers. Of the 86 interviews I did in Season 2, the 86 programs, this one was considered one of the most popular. From memory, it's only about an hour long, hour and a half maximum. And it is concise, intelligent, articulate, to the point. So join me tomorrow for that interview with Lyndon Rogers. Now, some of you have been sponsoring these shows, and I've really appreciated that. I'm surprised that no one has put their hand up to sponsor the Lyndon Rogers interview. That is going to go down in history. So if you would like to sponsor it, please contact me urgently, because I'll be working on that program at some point in about 10 hours time. But so if you have a website, a book, something that you would like to really promote that will be seen for years and years and years to come when anyone watches that program. And people do watch the programs after we've gone live, and they go back in time and they re-watch and they catch up. It's been incredible to witness. But this is going to be one of those historic interviews. So if you'd like to sponsor that, I do 3 plugs during the program with an image coming onto the screen of your website, your book, or whatever you want. And then another couple of times during the program, I talk about it and mention it. So if you'd like to sponsor that program, get in touch with me via Facebook Messenger ASAP, and we'll make sure that I get some artwork done up ready for you. Let's see a couple of comments before we close. Thank you. No Sunday Law. Ellen G. White manipulated others. Enough said. Yes. Jane. Freak shows were very common in that era. It's surprising she outlived him. Yeah. And yes, that era of, the late 1700s right up to the early 1900s, that kind of traveling show where there were all sort of ecstatic events occurring during the show were very, very popular. I've often said they're traveling carnival acts. They're a circus act. Ellen White and James were a circus act. And if you're a circus act, that doesn't mean that you are immoral. This is where I'm still on the edge of this thing, because they're not immoral, but the people doing the circus act know they are putting on a show. And there's a kind of a moment of where we hold in suspension this disbelief, where the audience knows that, the clown doesn't live their life like that all the time, that they're putting on a show, but they want it to be real. They want to feel that it's real. There's an engagement between an audience and a performer that allows for this concept of disbelief. It allows for this passing contribution between the two, whereas it's not totally truthful. And the audience says, but that's okay because I want to believe the myth and get lost in it. And the two flow together. When you're off the show and the circus tent is taken down and they move to another town, they live just as normally as the people watching the audience. So from the audience watching the show. And I never would call carnival acts, performers, as being immoral because they've put on a show. I put Ellen and James in that category. I do believe they knew what they were doing. I do believe that she did have a human condition, a mental disorder, and I feel really sorry for her for that. But I think she also knew that, hey, we're putting on a show. I got to have a vision tonight. I used to do gigs night after night on tour. And I learnt that no matter how I felt that day, I wasn't going to get up and be Mr. Sad Sack. I would always be, hi, everyone. Good to be here. Let's enjoy the show. Let's have a good time together. Let's go deep. Let's worship. Let's have fun. Whatever the night was, let's rock it out. Whatever it was. There's an element of walking into a scene with the audience and the artist where you are creating a mysterious, mythical experience that is filled with truth and beauty, but there are also lights, camera, action, things that have to come into the suite of events and tools that create a larger than life experience. And that's fine. But what Ellen did was involve that. And a lot of musicians and artists will say this. I don't know if you've heard this before, but the warning with all artists and musicians is don't believe your own hype. Because, a poster will come to town. Come and check out this award-winning artist and get lost in the beautiful essence of sound that they bring to the stage. And a lot of artists will go, oh, that's me. I bring this energy to people and the stage. And they believe their own hype. They believe their own marketing. And musicians go one way or the other if they're professional. Artists go one way or the other. Circus act, carnival acts go one way or the other if they do it professionally. You come to a moment where you go, whoa, am I doing this night after night for the next 20, 30 years? This is what I'm committing to do. And at that moment, you either become very ego-driven and believe that you're on a special mission called from God to bring all this entertainment and beautiful goodwill and love to people. And an ego journey begins for a lot of these people. Or you go, oh, hang on a second. If I am to do this night after night, this is a craft, a trade. This is something that I'm hoping to get better at. But you don't rely on the adulation of people. You don't rely on any kind of numbers. Is this making a lot of money? Did I get a lot of people turn up tonight? Those things matter in the sense of putting food on the table, but they don't become part of your identity. So professional artists, musicians, creatives, they all come to that moment after they've done maybe 6 months to 12 months of touring, where they either get lost in the nebulous world of ego or they become grounded in the understanding that it is a craft. I believe James understood it as a craft. I believe Ellen got lost in the ego journey. Thanks for letting me unpack this in real time. I'm thinking out loud as I go here to try and understand what was going on in her mind. So I believe that she put on a show. I believe she had definite mental health problems. But I then believe that particularly after James died, she lost her way. She no longer had the trade idea that this is a job idea. And she lost ego, power, control. And so she would revert back to being, morally strong, but then she would get lost in the attention. She several times talks about adulation and how bad it is. And I think she was speaking to herself there. Anyway, that's a little bit of a side riff. I hope that was insightful in some way. Stephen Beagles writes, I honestly think Ellen G. White would cry if she knew people were making her the infallible interpreter of scripture. I agree. But in light of this notion of her being a performer, getting lost in the ego, the attention seeking, why, for example, would you say it's okay that she was infallible? Yes, but saying, for example, with the dress that I can't whatever it was called, that dress, she said God told her that was important for all Adventist women to wear that, to buy the designs and to make the dresses and wear them. Why the reform dress? Why did that just disappear into nothing and became obviously something that people did not want to take on board? That's not that's infallible. If you, Stephen, if you and I came up with an idea of a special suit that, hey, if you're on SDAQ&A, you got to wear this suit, and it's very important that this button's done up and there's a tie, and I want the lapels to be this long, and there might be all sorts of good reasons, and it worked or it didn't work. Yeah, well, that's fallible humans. She wasn't infallible. We aren't. We are fallible, flawed. But she said God told her that this reform dress not only should, but would be received. And Cindy writes, Cindy Lou, the IJ is nothing but a cover-up for the October 22, 1844 debacle. Totally true, Cindy. It's a cover-up, and it's reverse engineered so obviously so that I'm amazed at how many people, try and defend it as being a meaningful date. When I interviewed Bill Johnson and said, what did he really think? How confident was he that something supernatural happened October 22, 1844? And he said, big long pause, as you all know, big long pause. Oh, I can't really answer that question. Come on. If you're a top-level leader of the Adventist Church, you should have gone immediately. Oh, of course, yes, 100% convinced something happened that night. But he wasn't stupid. He was a smart man, and he wrestled his whole life with this notion of, I know that that's wrong, but I'm an Adventist leader. Oh, that's cognitive. That you watch that, season 2, episode 1, is it? You watch that moment where he says that. Yeah. Just looking at these. And many of her testimonies, as Chanel points out, were wrong, later proven to be just false accusations. And she said if you ignore these testimonies, that you would fall into perdition. The IJ points us to the need for justification. Well, come up with that word if you want, but there's no need to have Ellen in the mix at all, in my humble opinion. Rochelle says, would love to see if you can dig up any personal testimonies of audience members from those shows and what they thought of them. Yeah, there are a few. I've read a few. And some are like, whoa, what's this rubbish? And others are like, whoa, that's amazing. The human desire to fall for this stuff is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling that even we, watching all this together, are guilty of it. Trail Rider writes, test the prophet. And thanks, by the way, Trail Rider, for putting me on to Dale Cardwell. Great program the other day. He will definitely be back. Tess the Prophet said people would carry her up front and then she would suddenly have energy as she stood up to speak. Yeah, that's right. And friends, go and check out Tess the Prophet's YouTube channel. Wow, incredible. There's an Australian performer, and at one point he was doing a show and he kind of got a bit carried away or whatever. He was unwell. He hadn't eaten, and he collapsed and fainted. And he used to play on this big kind of or big baby grand piano, and he'd be really. He was like a 50s rock and roll artist, but it was more in the late 60s and the 70s and even into the early 80s. So he was kind of reliving an era of the past and performing it in a more contemporary setting. Anyway, he as a lot of artists in the late 50s and 60s would do, they would kind of feign a collapse on stage. James Brown used to do it, and his backing singers would come over with a robe, and the music would keep going, and they'd be fanning him and putting a robe around him and helping him standing up, and then he'd fall again, and that was more comical, and you knew it was a show. But this Aussie guy, he literally hadn't eaten or something, and he fainted and collapsed on the piano, and it had such a big reaction. In fact, it kind of revived his career, that he would often do that at his live show, and people genuinely weren't sure if it was real or not, and he never really admitted it, whether it was real or not. Was this an ongoing problem he had, or was it part of the show? And that's exactly my thought on Ellen. It was part of the show, and I'm okay with that. You're watching a show, guys. Ellen White was part of a show. Her and James were putting on a show. What I don't like is that she carried that into her real life. And audiences, we, the audience, we need to be more discerning about that. Try and differentiate the person doing the show from the person when they are in real life. And this is what I was saying before. A lot of show people take that and think it's so real that in real life they kind of live it as well. David writes, gospel, it's a good example of trying to have a discussion about Ellen White. It's like squeezing Jell-O. Yeah. You just don't need Ellen White in the gospel component at all. You just don't need her at all. People say, well, she pointed me to Jesus. Well, if it wasn't her, there'd be someone else that would have or possibly could have pointed you that direction. But she did not have divine revelations from God. There's areas of her, I'm impressed with her show stuff. She really held her own in a male-driven world. She had some moments of inspiration. She was a creative artist, full of energy in many ways, but she didn't have divine revelation. She believed her own hype, lived in the real world as if she did, and demonstrated she was a normal, flawed human in real life. But she didn't have divine revelation. So you don't need her at all. You do not need Ellen at all. She can be seen as an interesting person in history. I don't see her as devotionally relevant like these guys. I don't see her as prophetically relevant. Some people say, well, providentially it started the church. Yeah, and created a whole bunch of confused people who can say, but at least we've got schools and a church and a health system and hospitals. Well, so do the Mormons. You don't need Ellen White at all. In fact, she gets in the way. And Mr. Vega points out, Gospel Adventists, if the IJ is true, then Jesus lied to the thief on the cross. Sir Nilo, the simpleton, writes, I'll never get to heaven if I'm always late to SDAQ&A. As long as you watch it the next day, I'll forgive you. You are forgiven, brother. And Michael puts gospel. There's nothing to judge. We're cleansed with the blood. And I think that's a differentiation of the judgment. The people who aren't with God are going to be judged and balanced. Those who are with God are already cleansed with the blood. And Ray is laughing the same. Late for SDAQ&A. What are those guys? Defense League. They've done a interview, and you can tell they've tried to purposely appropriate and copy SDAQ&A in their title and their new interviewing sort of series. Whatever. They love doing that stuff. I've seen them do it before. And Ray, don't forget you and Moto Sapiens soon. There's going to be a conversation. And Barry says gospel, referring to Stephen Beagles from Gospel Adventist fame. We need to do some work with you on the false IJ doctrine. False and engineered. He says, we will all stand before judgment seat of Christ. Yes. And some will have been judged yes or no. And those of us who have already been sealed because of the choice of acceptance we made. So you walk in and God goes out, out, in. Oh, you're in because you already believed. Boop, off you go, Pete. There will be no weighing in the balance, Stephen, of my good and bad works. There will be none. I will enter the pearly gates. St. Peter will say, hey, Pete, good name, mate. Go over there. There's Jesus and God. They're doing a little bit of a judgment thing. It's just a formality. I'll walk up to God and Jesus, and they go, hey, how you going, mate? You're a believer. In you go. There will not be a weighing up. Hey, that was a good 30-second little explanation of the gospel there and the judgment. 1 hour and 25 minutes. Oh, I must remember that. Make it a little grab. I'm not normally that erudite. And David says, look, great discussion, Pete. He's off to bed. Thanks for joining, Dave. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're again, wonderful comments. And thank you, Stephen Beagles, for always creating some interesting thoughts. Yeah, and Trail Rider writes, look, Adventism did more harm than good. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of good people. And Michael Johnson noticed, Peter, you just gave the gospel. Gospel Adventists never heard that from Ellen White. Yeah, I must remember that. 1 hour, 25 minutes in, I had a rare moment of clarity of what it looks like to come to the judgment. How can I remember that? Michael, can you remember? Can you remind me? Write it down. I've got no pen and paper. Thank you so much for joining me today, everybody. I have loved today's program. I quite enjoy when it's just me having a chat with you guys, and we might do some more of those in future. Tomorrow at 6:30 Pacific time, it's the Dr. Lyndon Rogers Season 2 rewatch. It is a fantastic interview. You must watch it. And then on the next day at 6:30 Pacific, 11:30 New South Wales, Australia, it's Jennifer Colburn's back. Cannot wait for that. And Jane said, the spirit of prophecy came over Peter. Yeah, I can't believe I explained it so clearly. Wow. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you very much. Take care. And again, thanks for your support. I really appreciate it so much. See you soon.